Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today as part of my B-Tier guides for Dragon Age Origins Awakening, I'm going to take you through the build I recommend for Nathaniel. He's my favorite guy from Dragon Age all the way up to Inquisition when Dorian overtakes him, so I enjoyed coming up with a nice archer build for him. Before we get into the build, I'll take a moment to say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much, and your support allows me to keep going. Joining as a member would help the channel a lot, but of course only do so if you want to and if you can afford it. I'm always grateful, even if you just like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment. Back to the guide. First, I have a few mods I recommend. Most important in both Origins and Awakening, Dane's Fixes. It resolves a lot of bugs related to combat and implements missing item properties. It has some pretty nice quality of life and balance adjustments too. And the best part about Dane's Fixes is that it's completely modular, so you can only copy the parts of it you want and ignore the rest. If you use Dane's Fixes, then I also recommend more detailed tooltips because it will show you the detailed descriptions for all the abilities, plus clearer numbers for item properties. There is one more mod I recommend that would be very useful for combat, Advanced Tactics. This fixes a lot of issues with follower AI and implements a bunch more options to choose from in the tactics menu. It also adds an option for melee rogues to position themselves better for backstabs. It will help you out a lot if you like to just control one main character and let everyone else do their own thing, since you'll be able to set up their tactics with more specific triggers for using abilities or items. And finally, I would also recommend the Respecification DAO mod that lets you re-specialize your Warden and Companions. In Awakening, you get access to Tomes of Focus that you can buy that also re-specialize the character, but I still recommend this mod. First, so you can re-specialize your Warden from Origins before you import them into Awakening if you want to change their build, especially if you think it's not very good for getting through the first mission of Awakening. This is because Tomes of Focus are only available after you complete the first mission. And the second reason is that with the mod you can choose to just partially re-specialize a character, which means they get to keep their initial specializations unlocked. This is important if you haven't yet played through Awakening because you won't have those unlocked yet, and if you use a Tome of Focus, the companion will also lose their starting specialization until you unlock it for yourself by buying the corresponding manual from a merchant. With that out of the way, let's get into Nathaniel's build. This will be a half damager, half support archer build that deals a ton of damage with ease, but also debuffs enemies for your party and makes it easier to survive fights through summoning an extra ally with the ranger specialization. There's already a good classic archer build that I made for Origins, and it continues to work well in Awakening too, as it's focused on increasing the rogue's dexterity, which scales very nicely with the new accuracy sustained. However, Nathaniel's character seems more defense and team-oriented, so for that I adjusted his build to have these support/utility options. You'll still do pretty much just as much damage as a classic archer though, so Nathaniel can also fill the role of a ranged damager. When you recruit him, Nathaniel has the following skills unlocked: 1 rank of stealing, 1 rank of poison making, maxed out combat training, 1 rank of combat tactics, and 1 rank of clarity. Combat training is the most important skill for warriors and rogues because it unlocks the weapon style talents, so it's very nice that it's already maxed out. From the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th ranks, you also get bonuses of plus 0.5 combat stamina regen, plus 6 attack, and plus 1 armor, which are nice to have, especially the stamina regen. Poison making is unfortunately not that useful for Nathaniel's build, since as an archer he can't use poisons. He could, however, throw grenades if you have this, so you could keep this 1 point into poison making if you want him to be able to use some grenades for extra area of effect damage. Although he will already have amazing AoE damaging talents, so he doesn't really need it. But you could just use him as the poison and grenade crafter. Combat tactics is fine, it just adds an extra tactics slot for Nathaniel, slightly useful for being more specific when setting up his tactics, but only if you feel like you need some extra tactic slots. Stealing is kind of useless in DAO, Awakening even more so. You can make extra money if you steal from all NPCs and maybe even some higher rank enemies if you have stealing maxed out. You could also get lucky and steal runes or consumables that you want to use, or some rare crafting ingredients. But overall, you don't need stealing. Awakening has less areas and NPCs to steal from, plus no unique gear to steal either, so it has way less value than in Origins. If you want to use it though, I recommend maxing it out so that Nathaniel can also steal from enemies in combat, especially elites or bosses. I highly recommend using the Dane's Fixes tweak that reduces the cooldown of stealing, otherwise it has a 10-second cooldown and it gets very annoying to wait for it. Finally, Clarity is one of the new awakening skills that grants plus 25 mana or stamina per rank. This is useful for every character, regardless of class, since the bigger mana or stamina pool will allow you to use more abilities before you have to drink a stamina draft or wait for it to regenerate. Overall, Nathaniel has everything he needs already, which is combat training. Everything else is a bonus. If you respecialize him, you could ignore poison making, stealing, and possibly combat tactics in favor of putting some more points into Clarity or into Vitality, which grants plus 25 health per rank. But his starting skills are honestly fine. Now, here are Nathaniel's starting abilities. From the Rogue Tree, Dirty Fighting, Combat Movement, Below the Belt, and 2 ranks of the Lockpicking and Disarming passive. Dirty Fighting is great because it stuns an enemy and it can't be resisted. The duration is fairly short, only 4 seconds, and it's adjusted by enemy rank, so higher rank enemies won't be stunned for long. For an archer, this is a great defensive talent to use if a strong enemy comes up to your archer to attack them, in order to possibly have time to kill them or at least run away. Combat Movement is a passive that increases the flanking angle from 120 to 180 degrees. The flanking bonus to attack is increased from plus 15 to plus 20, and the rogue also gets plus 2% melee crit chance. This isn't strictly necessary for archers, it's mostly an upgrade for backstabs. However, you do benefit from flanking bonuses if you shoot enemies in their backs. So this would increase your chance to hit slightly. You don't really need it because Nathaniel will have high attack due to his high dexterity. So if you respecialize him, I would skip getting this until after you got the talents you actually want. Below the Belt is a kick with a plus 5 attack bonus that inflicts a penalty of minus 5 defense and 50% movement speed to the target unless it passes a physical resistance check against the rogue's cunning. This is a strong melee damaging talent for an archer because the damage scales with dexterity, and as an archer you have a lot of that. It also doesn't require having a melee weapon equipped, so it's pretty much the only melee talent for archers. I'd use Below the Belt first on an enemy attacking Nathaniel in melee, and if this doesn't kill them, use Dirty Fighting afterwards. The Deft Hands tree is all about allowing the rogue to unlock higher difficulty doors and chests and disarm more difficult traps. Since Nathaniel has 2 ranks in it, he'll be pretty good at it, but I do recommend maxing it out because sometimes there are very high difficulty locks or traps. Nathaniel's build overall doesn't need too many more points for combat talents, so it's perfectly fine to max this row out, especially if you respecialize him and get rid of the abilities he doesn't need. From the archery tree, he has Melee Archer, Aim, Defensive Fire, Pinning Shot, Crippling Shot, Critical Shot, Arrow of Slaying, Rapid Shot, and Shattering Shot. Melee Archer is a passive that allows the archer to keep firing shots without getting interrupted when they are attacked. This is the most important ability that every archer must have immediately because there are a lot of fights in hallways and cramped areas, meaning that your archer can get hit fairly often, so it's great Nathaniel already has this. Aim is a sustained that doubles your critical chance from other bonuses and grants plus 10 attack, plus 2 damage, and plus 3 armor penetration, while increasing aim time by 1.5 seconds. Master Archer increases the bonuses to these stats. This is one of the best archer talents since it will increase your damage by a lot, but the aim time penalty makes it only usable if you have rapid aim bonuses on your items to offset it. It's easy to get items with this in Awakening, far easier than in the early game of Origins, so you can use this soon after recruiting Nathaniel. You can combine this with a new accuracy sustain since it will increase his crit chance even further. However, in Awakening you don't strictly need aim anymore, because the bonuses from accuracy are so good if you have high dex that aim is very small compared to that. So you can use this if you want to increase Nathaniel's crit chance more, maybe even get it to 100%, but only use it if you have enough rapid aim to offset the aim time penalty. Otherwise, the penalty will reduce Nathaniel's damage output. Defensive Fire is a sustained talent that grants plus 15 defense while active, but increases aim time by 1.2 seconds. Master Archer doubles the defense bonus. Keep in mind that Rapid Shot, Aim, and Defensive Fire are mutually exclusive, so you can only have one of these active at a time. Aim is usually better if you want to choose one of these, especially because a dexterity-focused archer has a huge defense score already, so I wouldn't use this unless you're doing some kind of challenge run. Pinning Shot pins the target in place for 8.5 seconds unless it passes a physical resistance check against the attacker's cunning, and only slows its movement speed by 50% otherwise. On Hard or Nightmare, I've noticed that enemies tend to resist this effect very often, so I don't recommend it if you're playing on higher difficulties. On Easy or Normal, it could be very useful to try to temporarily disable an enemy spellcaster or archer. though you could just as well use an auto-crit ability to kill them. Crippling Shot fires a shot that inflicts a penalty of -10 attack and defense to the target for 20 seconds if it hits. The hit can be critical. This is pretty good to use against elites or bosses, since the duration of this penalty is always 20 seconds regardless of enemy rank. Normal enemies are too easy to kill for the debuff to be worth putting on them, though I personally don't tend to use this much unless the elite or boss in question is able to attack quite quickly, like maybe an elite blighted werewolf or shriek or something like that. Critical Shot fires an arrow that is an automatic critical if it hits, and this shot also gets +10 armor penetration. Like any auto-crit ability, this is perfect against frozen or petrified enemies to shatter them. You can also use it on high priority enemies to possibly kill them in one shot, in particular enemy spellcasters or elites. You can also use both Critical Shot and the next talent Arrow of Slaying one after another to extremely quickly get rid of 2 enemies at the start of combat. Arrow of Slaying is another auto-crit talent, and it has an inherent +5 attack bonus. If the strike connects, it actually deals double the normal critical damage, and the weapon damage is maximized. There is one important thing to keep in mind though, which is that after using this talent, the archer will have a -1 stamina regeneration penalty for the next 10 seconds. If you have bonuses to stamina regen from gear, this shouldn't be a problem, especially since in Awakening you have stamina drafts that restore stamina. Rapid Shot is a sustain that reduces your aim animation by a maximum of 2 seconds or 3 seconds if you have Master Archer, but it causes your hits to no longer be able to crit. Aim speed can only be reduced to 0. Most items with the Rapid Aim property reduce aim time by 0.3 seconds, so for longbows and shortbows which have an aim time of 0.3 and 0.2 seconds respectively, Rapid Shot becomes useless if you have an item with Rapid Aim equipped. You can only have one sustained out of Aim, Defensive Fire, and Rapid Shot active at a time. In Origins, this ability was useful in the early game, but in Awakening it's useless because you're high level and you can get a great bonus to crit chance with accuracy, plus optionally aim, so you want to take advantage and crit as much as you can. Shattering Shot deals regular damage and reduces the target's armor by 10 for 20 seconds. With Master Archer, it reduces it by 20 points instead. Critter and normal enemies are also briefly knocked down by it, but there's no reason to use it on them since they have low armor scores. Only use this against tanky elites or bosses since they have higher armor. This will essentially make your physical characters in the party deal more damage against that enemy. Finally, Nathaniel has the Assassin specialization, which grants +2 dexterity and +2.5% melee crit chance. The dex is a nice bonus for an archer, but the melee crit chance is useless, obviously. However, the Assassin specialization does have one extremely powerful ability that archers can use, which more than makes up for the rest of the abilities being focused on backstabs: Mark of Death. Nathaniel has it unlocked from the start. Mark of Death causes the target to take 20% more damage for the next 20 seconds from all sources. This is an incredibly powerful ability to use on a high-rank enemy, an elite or boss, because it will make them much easier to kill. Everyone in your party benefits from this. You don't need anything else from the Assassin tree since the rest of the passives are all about backstabs, but I 100% recommend keeping the Assassin specialization because Mark of Death is just that good. Nathaniel's starting gear is decent, in particular his gloves and chest piece, though his weapon needs to be upgraded ASAP. Antivan Longbow is a tier 7 longbow that grants +1% ranged crit chance. This is essentially a basic weapon, since that 1% bonus is nothing, so this is the first item you should replace immediately. You can get a special bow for Nathaniel right after the first mission in the game, in the basement of Vigil's Keep, which is actually one of the recommended bows for Nathaniel. Or of course you can use a DLC bow or a good bow imported from Origins if you have one. Ornate leather gloves are tier 7 light gloves that grant +2 dexterity and +1 armor. These are very nice due to the bonus to dex, increasing Nathaniel's damage, ranged attack, and defense. You don't need to replace them, but you may want to if you find a pair of gloves you like better. The Bear's Embrace is a tier 7 light chest piece that grants +3 dexterity, +1 armor, and +5 physical resistance. Again, the dex bonus is very nice, but I would recommend replacing this if you can, because there are a few chest pieces that are better. Studded leather boots are tier 7 basic light boots. Replace these ASAP with something that has actual bonuses. Buckle of the Winds is a belt that grants +3 defense. Nathaniel doesn't care much about defense since he gets a lot of it from dexterity, so replace this with a belt with offensive or utility bonuses. Shaper's Amulet is an amulet that grants +2 willpower, that's just +10 stamina, so replace it with something better as soon as you get a more offensive focused amulet, or at least one with more bonuses. Worn Golden Ring is Nathaniel's unique companion item, a ring that grants +3 cunning and +10% dodge chance. For this archer build, this kind of sucks. Nathaniel shouldn't get attacked that much, so dodge chance isn't relevant, plus rogues have access to 2 amazing defensive talents, Ghost and Strength of Stone, that make a lot of these defensive stats kind of useless. The cunning bonus will increase damage a bit, plus the effectiveness of some talents in lockpicking or disarming, but you may be able to get something better that has both cunning and dex, or bonuses to all attributes. Dusk Ring is a ring that grants +3 cunning and -1 strength. Cunning is fine enough, but not as useful as dexterity, so same thing as with the previous ring. Moving on to recommended attributes, you mainly care about dexterity because it will increase your damage with bows, your attack, and defense. The new accuracy sustained in the archery tree has all of its bonuses scale with dexterity, and it becomes incredible when you have very high dexterity, so pretty much all your points can go into dex. I do recommend putting some points into cunning because a bunch of talents benefit from it and it also gives you more armor penetration. In order to max out the lockpicking and disarming skill, you'll need 22 base cunning, but I'd recommend going up to about 30 or 35 to have that extra AP and to improve your chances to cause certain debuffs on enemies with your talents that have a resistance check. You need a total of 24 strength to equip tier 9 light armor pieces if you're playing the vanilla game. If you have the first Legionnaire Scout passive that grants you +10 strength, you will only need a few more points into strength at most for equipping armor. If you have items that grant bonuses to strength or all attributes, you may not even need to spend any points into it at all. I recommend having willpower at about 20 to 25 base score. You don't need to spend much on willpower because you can get bonuses to stamina and willpower from gear and the clarity skill, but having a slightly larger stamina pool does help you use your talents more comfortably without having to use too many stamina drafts. And finally, as a tiny optional thing, I recommend having a total magic score between 13 and 15. Magic increases all characters' healing from poultices and spells, but if you already have some bonuses to all attributes on gear, then you won't need to spend any on magic. You don't need Constitution, it mainly just grants health. Nathaniel shouldn't be getting targeted by enemies much, but he will also have very good defense against physical attacks, and the amazing Ghost and Strength of Stone abilities will protect him just fine. Plus, his damage is so high that he can easily kill most enemies that are bothering him. For recommended skills, Nathaniel already has what he needs, so anything you choose here is fine. I personally recommend unlocking extra ranks of Clarity and with a lower priority Vitality. Clarity grants +25 stamina per rank, and Vitality grants +25 health per rank. You care more about the extra stamina from Clarity, but you'll run out of things to put your skill points into, and extra health is never bad. You could of course max out Stealing if you're interested in using it, or Poison Making if you want Nathaniel to craft poisons and grenades for the team. Finally, you could get more ranks of combat training for more tactic slots to have more freedom when setting up Nathaniel's behavior in combat. Let's move on to the recommended abilities. As I said in the introduction, this will be a kind of supportive archer, though a good archer is always first and foremost a damager with their basic attacks and autocrit abilities. From the archery tree, unlock Master Archer, Suppressing Fire, Scattershot, Accuracy, Arrow Time, Burst Shot, and Rain of Arrows. Master Archer is a passive that grants bonuses to many of your archery talents. Aim receives a bonus of +5 attack, +2 armor penetration, and +1 damage. Defensive Fire gets +15 defense. Crippling Shot and Arrow of Slaying get +15 attack each. Critical Shot gets +10 armor penetration. Rapid Shot gets an increased aiming speed bonus of 100%. Shattering Shot provides an additional -10 reduction of the target's armor. Finally, this passive eliminates a penalty to ranged attack speed when wearing heavy chest armor, but there isn't really a reason to be wearing heavy chest pieces. This is a nice upgrade, especially for Critical Shot, Arrow of Slaying, and Shattering Shot, but I recommend unlocking Accuracy first for the huge offensive bonuses it grants to all your attacks. Only unlock Master Archer after that. Suppressing Fire is a sustain that makes each of the archer's shots to apply a penalty of -7.5 attack for 10 seconds to the enemy or enemy's hit. The time is adjusted by enemy rank, so it won't last as long for every enemy. In regular archer builds from Origins, I didn't recommend keeping this sustained, but it's a nice debuff to apply to enemies if you need it. Since Nathaniel's build wants to help out his team more, then for him I do recommend keeping Suppressing Fire sustained, especially because it doesn't have any stamina regeneration penalties. This is great if combined with an archery talent that hits multiple enemies like Scattershot, Burst Shot, and possibly Rain of Arrows. Scattershot fires a single arrow that automatically hits its target, stunning it and dealing normal damage. The arrow then shatters, hitting all nearby enemies with the same effect. The stun duration isn't very long, only 2 seconds, and it's also adjusted by enemy rank. However, the fact that it automatically hits the stun can't be resisted unless a creature is immune to stuns, and it also stuns all nearby enemies is amazing. In addition to normal damage, this ability deals 15 bonus damage. In the vanilla game, if the primary target is killed by Scattershot, the secondary targets won't be hit, but Dane's Fixes solves this. Scattershot also applies various on-hit effects, so it's great to use with something like Suppressing Fire, which applies a debuff to all enemies hit, or various bonuses to the damage of your hits. This is one of my favorite archery abilities and also one of the ones I fear the most when it's used against my party, so I recommend unlocking it as soon as you can after Accuracy. Speaking of, Accuracy is a sustained that grants the archer bonuses to attack and damage equal to their dexterity minus 10, and bonuses to ranged crit chance and ranged crit damage equal to their dexterity minus 10 times 0.5. The ranged crit chance bonus provided by Accuracy can also be doubled by aim if you activate aim after Accuracy, but as I mentioned when discussing aim, I don't recommend using it unless you can offset its aim time penalty. Plus, Accuracy is already incredibly powerful on its own if your dexterity is high enough, so that's why I recommend putting most of your points into dexterity and looking for more bonuses to dex on gear. Arrow Time is another sustained that reduces the movement speed of enemies by 20% within a certain range of the archer while this is active. This mode has a huge stamina penalty regeneration of minus 10 though, so it would be quite hard to offset this penalty with bonuses to stamina regen from equipped items. I do like this ability as a concept, but the unfortunate reality is that it only reduces enemies' movement speed by a little bit and nothing else. If it also reduced their attack speed, it would be far more useful. However, as it stands, even though it's kind of a support ability, don't use it. Burst Shot shoots a special arrow that scores a triple critical hit against a target. The arrow then shatters, inflicting half of that damage on enemies within a 3-meter radius from the primary target. Friendly fire is possible, so be careful with this because you could end up accidentally killing one of your allies. The hit from this ability isn't actually counted as a crit, so you can't use it for shattering frozen or petrified enemies, and it won't benefit from bonuses you have towards critical damage. This is still a great AoE ability because it deals a ton of damage to all the enemies in an area. It also functions similarly to Scattershot, meaning that on-hit effects will be applied, so you can apply the attack debuff from Suppressing Fire on all enemies if you don't just straight up kill them with this, as well as additional damage or effects. Rain of Arrows shoots multiple arrows in the sky that rain down over time in a targeted 7.5-meter circle. It deals 10 instances of damage over 10 seconds. Do be careful because these arrows can come down upon your archer, so you want to move out of there. The base damage of this talent isn't very high, and it costs 80 stamina to activate, but it has the potential to be good if it applies on-hit effects like Scattershot and Burst Shot, in which case it's another way to apply the attack debuff from Suppressing Fire, plus any damage bonuses you have. But due to the high stamina cost, I only recommend using this when there are at least 3 or 4 enemies in a small area, and only if you're fairly sure they're going to stay there for the next 10 seconds. It would be best to pair this with a Mage's Blizzard spell, or something else that can immobilize enemies. From the Rogue tree, unlock Deadly Strike and Lethality. Optionally, you can also get the last 2 ranks in the Deft Hands tree to ensure Nathaniel can unlock all doors and chests, and be better at spotting and disarming traps. Later on, after you've gotten your specialization abilities, pick up Heartseeker and Ghost for Ghost's defensive use. Optionally, you could also unlock Weak Points, though it's a tiny bonus to your party's damage, so it's not that amazing. Deadly Strike is a melee attack that strikes the enemy with a plus 10 bonus to attack, dealing maximum damage and also having plus 10 armor penetration for this hit. Since Nathaniel obviously doesn't use a melee weapon, this talent is useless. You just need it so you can get Lethality. Lethality is a passive that grants a permanent plus 10% melee crit chance, but it also makes your Cunning be used as a damage modifier for weapons if it's higher than your Strength. The melee crit chance is obviously useless, but the damage bonus you can get from Cunning is significant enough to make this a useful passive to unlock. You don't need to rush for this though, since you already have a ton of damage from your Dexterity and from the Accuracy sustained. Heartseeker strikes a target in melee and deals spirit damage, but it requires a melee weapon to be equipped. Targets with less than 250 HP take damage equal to their max HP, otherwise regular critical damage is dealt. Since this is a melee weapon talent, you can't use it. Just like with Deadly Strike, you only want this so you can get the next ability. Ghost grants plus 100% dodge chance for 15 seconds. Any attacks that can be dodged, whether melee or ranged, will not connect. This will not help you against abilities that automatically hit, like Scattershot, Overwhelm, Ram, or the massive attack that certain large enemies can do around them. For protection against those, you'll have to use the other defensive ability I recommend, Strength of Stone. However, this is very nice when you fight regular enemies like Hurlocks, Genlocks, any warrior or rogue humanoids really, but only use this if Nathaniel is actively being attacked by such an enemy. Weak Points is a sustain that applies an on-hit effect that adds a debuff to the target of your attacks, which increases the damage they receive by 5% for the next 5 seconds. This is similar to the Mark of Death talent from the Assassin specialization, but it's a much tinier effect and lasts for less time. However, since Nathaniel will be using Scattershot and Burst Shot fairly often, he can apply this debuff to multiple enemies together with the attack score debuff from Suppressing Fire, so it's decently useful. 5% extra damage taken isn't that impactful though, considering your damagers are already doing huge numbers with their attacks and abilities, but if you have nothing better to do after you've unlocked the more important abilities of this build, this is nice to add a bit of extra damage to the entire team. It doesn't have any penalties to stamina regen either, so you can use it without having to worry about anything. For Nathaniel's specializations, the first one I recommend is the Legionnaire Scout. This specialization will make Nathaniel's build way more comfortable, first due to Mark of the Legion's bonus to strength that helps you equip armor without needing to invest into strength pretty much at all. Secondly, and far more importantly, the huge defensive impact of the Strength of Stone talent. Unlocking the Legionnaire Scout grants plus 2 dexterity and plus 1 damage, which is very nice for any rogue, but especially an archer. You only need the first 2 abilities from this specialization, but I recommend unlocking them immediately after you unlock Accuracy if possible. Mark of the Legion is a passive that grants a huge bonus of plus 10 Strength and plus 10 Constitution. The Strength single-handedly takes care of the strength requirements for the highest tier light armors. If you're using the Dexterity Light Armors mod like I am, then you won't care about this because light armors will have dexterity requirements, but if you're using the vanilla light armors, then this is absolutely amazing. With Mark of the Legion, you need to have a base score of only 14 Strength, and everything else can go into Dexterity and Cunning. The extra 10 Constitution gives you 50 extra health, which is always a great defensive bonus. But there's an even better ability to help Nathaniel survive in tough fights. Strength of Stone makes the rogue completely immune to damage for 15 seconds, plus all their physical resistance checks will always succeed. Your rogue will be immune to all attacks, abilities, and spells, including friendly fire. The effect will also make the rogue completely immune to Overwhelm, which is especially good in fights against blighted werewolves and darkspawn childers. I like having this talent unlocked as soon as possible on pretty much all my rogues in Awakening, because it allows them to ignore pretty much any kind of danger for 15 seconds and instead focus on dealing huge amounts of damage. The final specialization I recommend is the Ranger. This is because you can summon a beast that will help you, especially when you're fighting larger groups of enemies. A wolf will be more agile and have higher damage, while a bear is a great tanky character for your frontline. I don't recommend summoning a spider, not because of my hatred of spiders, but because I just don't think it's as good as the others. Plus, it's kind of weird that a ranger would be able to befriend or tame a giant spider, let's be real. But I'll discuss all the different summons so you can, of course, choose for yourself which one you prefer. Summon Wolf is a sustain that summons a wolf companion. The wolf has access to the Howl ability as a baseline and Shred if it's upgraded by the Master Ranger passive. It also gets upgraded to a Blight Wolf by Master Ranger, which changes both its visuals and stats. Howl reduces the defense of nearby enemies, and Shred is an auto-crit that deals extra bleeding damage to targets that have blood. Summon Bear is a sustained that summons a bear companion. The bear has the Slam ability as a baseline, and Rage if you upgrade it with Master Ranger. Its creature type also changes from Black Bear to Great Bear if upgraded. Slam is a taunt that is an auto-crit if it hits, and also knocks the target down unless it passes a physical resistance check versus the bear's strength. Rage is an ability that increases the bear's strength by 10 for 30 seconds, while reducing its defense by 15. Summon Spider is a sustain that summons a giant spider or a poisonous spider if upgraded by Master Ranger. The spider will have the Web ability baseline and Poison Spit if upgraded. Web paralyzes a target for 4 to 8 seconds based on enemy rank, and Poison Spit deals nature damage over time to a target. Nature damage isn't great since most enemies are resistant to it, and quite a lot of them are completely immune, like undead. Web is the only great thing about the spider since it paralyzes the enemy seemingly without a resistance check, but it's on a 30-second cooldown, so your spider will only be useful in a fight once every 30 seconds. Still, it's a decent option if you need an extra paralysis effect, like for example for a melee rogue who can take advantage of it with coup de grace to automatically backstab that paralyzed enemy. Master Ranger is a passive that upgrades all 3 summon abilities, changing the creature type of the summon as well as granting them an extra ability. The wolf turns into a blight wolf and gains shred, the black bear turns into a great bear and gains rage, and the giant spider turns into a poisonous spider and gains poison spit. The beast will have better base stats, and their level will be higher too. Without Master Ranger, their level is 75% of your Ranger's level, and with Master Ranger, it's 90%. Each animal also gets plus 2.5 combat health regeneration, which is especially nice for the bear to make it even tankier. Technically, there is a way you could improve the abilities of your wolf, in particular if you click the notification about the new tactic slots that pops up when you summon it. If you manage to do that quickly enough while the notification is on the screen, you will be able to set up in the wolf's tactics to use some additional abilities that won't normally appear in its action bar. These are Overwhelm and Dread Howl, and if upgraded with Master Ranger, also Charge and Growl will appear in the tactics screen. The spider and bear don't get any new abilities by doing this, other than unlocking their Master Ranger ability before you pick up the passive, so there's no real point in doing this for the bear or spider. I personally find this too annoying to bother with because you have to do it every time you summon the wolf, and you will need to re-summon it whenever you enter a new area. But for anyone who doesn't mind the tedious aspect of this, the Overwhelm and Dread Howl abilities are very powerful. Overwhelm doesn't allow a resistance check and will work against most regular-sized humanoid enemies other than undead, pinning them down on the ground and dealing lots of damage. And Dread Howl stuns all nearby enemies. So due to the usefulness of these abilities, I figured I'd mention this in case you want to improve your wolf summon. I personally recommend using a bear most of the time because an extra tank-like character on the field is great to keep enemies occupied while you kill them with your squishier damagers. If you're fighting in smaller areas like hallways or tunnels though, I'd recommend summoning the wolf instead, since the bear may make it awkward for your other melee characters to move around. Since your summoned animal will disappear whenever you enter a new area, I recommend adding whichever summon you prefer to Nathaniel's tactics and set it to Self, Any, Activate Ability, Summon X. That way you don't have to do it yourself every time you travel between areas. Moving on to recommended gear. As part of recommending gear for Awakening characters, I'll only recommend the items you can obtain in Awakening. If you have a really good item from importing your Origins Warden, then by all means use it if it has good stats similar to what I recommend, but I can't really recommend DAO items because you don't always import your Warden when you play Awakening. Even if you do, it's not guaranteed you'll have those items in your inventory. I may mention an item from DAO here and there if I think it would be particularly nice to have, or if Awakening doesn't have enough good options, but otherwise you'll have to figure out yourself if an item from Origins will be useful. But to make that easier, I'll explain the main bonuses you want to have on Nathaniel's items. On weapons, you want bonuses to damage, critical chance, critical damage, and armor penetration. Most enemies don't have very high armor scores though, so AP bonuses aren't as important as the other stats. If you are still using the aim sustained, it has that aim speed penalty of plus 1.5 seconds, which you should try to offset with rapid aim gear. You can usually find this property on bows, but a few armor pieces also have it. But as I mentioned earlier when I discussed aim, accuracy is much better than aim and doesn't have any penalties, so you can just ignore aim, and in that case you won't need rapid aim. For armor, the main offensive bonuses to get are Dexterity, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and possibly Cunning, though Dexterity is the bigger priority. The best utility bonuses are to Stamina and Fatigue, and the best defensive stats are Defense and Armor together with Dexterity, which is good for both offense and defense. For accessories, the same stats from the other item types are good, especially the offensive ones. Some accessories also have bonuses to all attributes, which are also very nice since they give you bonuses to Dexterity as well as all the other attributes which will help you out. And finally, you can also get some bonuses to Stamina regeneration here, though Nathaniel doesn't really need it since his build doesn't use sustained abilities with stamina regen penalties, so I'd recommend keeping items with this particular bonus for other party members who need it. Now that you know what Nathaniel generally likes on his gear, here are the items I personally recommend. For weapons, the best ranged weapons to use are longbows, so that's what I'll recommend. How Bow is a tier 9 longbow restricted to Nathaniel that grants +3 damage, plus 5% ranged crit chance, plus 4 attack, and it has a -0.2 second rapid aim. This is a gift you can obtain for Nathaniel from the basement of Vigil's Keep. You can get this immediately after the first mission if you talk to Sergeant Maverleys in the courtyard to start the It Comes From Beneath quest and clear out the basement of Darkspawn. Heartwood Bow is a tier 9 longbow that grants +5 dexterity, +5 cunning, plus 5% ranged crit chance, plus 6 attack, and it has a -0.3 second rapid aim. This bow is craftable by Master Wade during the Heart of the Forest side quest if you choose the bow instead of the shield as a quest reward. The shield is also amazing, so it's up to you whether you want to upgrade Nathaniel's damage or the defensive stats of a weapon and shield tank. You'll need a bunch more ingredients to craft this. Most of the items are obtained from Amaranthine, but one is a bit harder to obtain, the Grandmaster Lightning Rune. You may have this from Origins if you imported your Warden, but otherwise you'll have to craft it. Well worth it, in my opinion, for either the bow or the shield. The Sorrows of Arlathan is a tier 9 longbow that grants +5 damage, plus 10% ranged crit chance, plus 4 AP, and which has a very nice -1 second rapid aim bonus. You can have this in your inventory from the beginning of the game if you earned an achievement during the Witch Hunt DLC. The Sorrows of Arlathan is my personal favorite because it has the highest damage and AP bonuses, plus nice crit chance and a rapid aim property that offsets most of the aim speed penalty of the aim sustained. So especially if you still want to use aim for extra bonuses, this is the best bow. You can get a bit more rapid aim from some armor pieces, so you'll super easily offset aim's penalty entirely. Heartwood Bow is my second choice due to the bonuses to both Dex and Cunning. Even though it doesn't have direct bonuses to damage like the Sorrows of Arlathan, the Dex will increase your damage as well as crit chance and crit damage due to the accuracy sustained, and the Cunning helps your damage through the lethality passive and also adds a bit of armor penetration. The How Bow is third best. It has good stats, it's free, you obtain it super early, and of course it's Nathaniel's family bow. In most of my playthroughs, Nathaniel has this equipped for the entire game for sentimental reasons, but on higher difficulties I choose one of the other two. The other high tier bows you can obtain in Awakening are pretty good, but they're not as good as these three. Moving on to armor. By far the best armor pieces you can get for Nathaniel are from the Nimble armor set. It has bonuses to dexterity, cunning, ranged crit chance, crit damage, as well as a 0.5 second rapid aim and 50 stamina, alongside some defensive stats. The set bonus is plus 20% fire and cold resistance, which isn't relevant, so you don't need to equip the entire set. This is good because you may not be able to obtain the entire set due to one of the items being only a rare potential drop. Don't stress about it, you can just choose the best pieces from the Nimble set and pair them with other good non-set pieces. For chest pieces, here are the best ones. Battle Dress of the Provocateur is a tier 9 light chest piece with 3 rune slots that grants plus 6 dexterity, plus 5 armor, plus 15% dodge chance, plus 1 combat stamina regen, and plus 50 stamina. It's a DLC item you'll have in your inventory from the beginning of the game if you unlock an achievement in the Liliana's Song DLC. The bonus to dexterity is the best part, though of course the others are nice for defenses and utility. Vest of the Nimble is a tier 8 light chest piece with 3 rune slots and grants plus 5 dexterity, plus 5 cunning, and plus 1 armor. This is the item from the Nimble set that is only a rare drop, possible to loot from very infrequently encountered crow assassins, in a couple of side quests and 1 random encounter on the world map. Don't worry if you get it, just use the battle dress or Nathaniel's starting armor instead. I will mention that if you have the Felon's Coat imported from Origins, that would also be nice here, granting similar bonuses to the battle dress, but it won't have rune slots, unlike the Awakening chest pieces. For helmets, here are the useful ones. Armsman's Tensioner is a tier 6 light helmet that grants plus 6 attack and a -0.3 second rapid aim bonus. You can buy it from the bartender at the Crown and Lion Tavern in Amaranthine for a bit over 4 gold. Since longbows have a 0.3 aim time, you could use this to entirely offset the aim time of bow that doesn't already have rapid aim, but if you're using the aim sustained, then this would be great to help you offset some of the aim speed penalty of it, especially if paired with the Sorrows of Arlathan bow. Since it's cheap, it's a very good helmet for an archer. Cap of the Nimble is a tier 9 light helmet that grants plus 6 cunning, plus 2 armor, plus 20% spell resistance, and plus 10 mental resistance. The cunning bonus will give you some extra armor penetration and increase your damage slightly with the lethality passive. You can buy this from Uriah in the throne room of Vigil's Keep after upgrading his stock for the second time for a bit over 165 gold. It's not super easy to upgrade Uriah's stock a second time, and this helmet is also super expensive, so it's okay if you can't get this. Just use Armsman's Tensioner, or maybe a helmet imported from Origins like the Free Scout Arming Cap for its plus 2 Dexterity, or the Quicksilver Arming Cap for plus 2 Cunning. Finally, Quicksilver is a tier 9 light helmet that grants plus 6 Cunning, plus 9 defense, and plus 5% dodge chance. You can loot it from a bone pile in the Dragonbone Wastes. Unfortunately, you only loot this as part of the final main quest, so you'll only be able to use it for a little bit. It's super similar to Cap of the Nimble anyway, so it's not that interesting unless you weren't able to get the cap, in which case this would be a potential upgrade for that final mission. For gloves, here are the good ones. Fingers of the Nimble are tier 8 light gloves that grant plus 6 dexterity, plus 10% ranged crit chance, plus 15% crit or backstab damage, and a minus 0.5 second rapid aim bonus. You can buy them from the bartender at the Crown and Lion Tavern in Amaranthine for almost 78 gold. These are amazing for the dex, crit chance, and crit damage. If you pair them with the Sorrows of Arlathan bow and the Armsman's Tensioner helmet, you can offset the aim sustained penalty entirely, plus also the inherent 0.3 second aim time of the longbow, so you can shoot super quickly, which is very fun. These are by far the best gloves. The Slippery Ferret's gloves are tier 9 light gloves that grant plus 4 dexterity, plus 8 cunning, plus 1 armor, and plus 10% crit chance for both melee and ranged attacks. You can loot these from a dragon thrall at the end of the quest The Righteous Path, the main quest in the Wending Wood. These are the best free gloves, so if you want to use your money on other items from merchants instead of Fingers of the Nimble, I recommend following the Righteous Path quest early. Trickster's gloves are tier 8 light gloves that grant plus 3 dexterity and plus 4 attack. You can loot them in Smuggler's Cove during the Law and Order side quest. They're part of the Trickster armor set, but the set bonus is a measly minus 5% fatigue bonus, and the other pieces aren't as good, so just use these gloves on their own. These are just slightly better than Nathaniel's starting gloves, but they are a slight upgrade and they're free, so you might as well use them before you can get one of the other two. For boots, here are the good options. Wolf Treads are tier 9 light boots that grant plus 3 dexterity, plus 3 cunning, plus 6 defense, and missile avoidance. They're rogue restricted and you can loot them from an Avar sarcophagus during the quest The Wraith's Vengeance in the Vigil's Keep Deep Roads area that you'll be able to access after completing one main quest. I've heard there's a possible bug that prevents Nathaniel from equipping these boots, but I personally haven't encountered it. Feet of the Nimble are tier 8 light boots that grant plus 50 stamina. You can loot them in Smuggler's Cove as part of the Law and Order quest if you side with the guards against the smugglers. They're rogue restricted and part of the Nimble set, not as good as the Wolf Treads, but since there's very slim pickings for rogue boots in Awakening, the extra stamina is a good utility bonus. Trickster's boots are tier 8 light boots that grant plus 20% electricity resistance and minus 10% fatigue. They're also rogue restricted and can be looted from a skeleton in the Vigil's Keep Deep Road section during the Wraith's Vengeance, but since you can also get the Wolf Treads in the same quest, those are way better, and I'd rather keep these as a potential option for a character wearing mostly heavy or massive armor to reduce their fatigue, like Sigrun. There are two good pairs of boots from Origins if you import your Warden, the light boots Silver Hammer's Tackmasters for plus 2 dexterity, and the medium boots Kadash Stompers that you can get as part of Shale's personal quest for plus 2 dexterity among a couple other decent stats. Not as good as Wolf's Treads, but better than the other two Awakening boots. Moving on to accessories. For belts, there's only 3 good options. Panacea grants plus 3 dexterity and plus 25% to healing effects received. You can buy this from Heren in the Vigil's Keep Courtyard for almost 10 gold. The healing effect bonus is bugged in the base game and does nothing, but it's properly implemented if you have Dane's fixes. But either way, you just want the dex from this, so it doesn't matter even if you're playing the vanilla game. I think 10 gold is cheap enough for plus 3 dex, so I recommend buying it. Gladiator's Belt grants plus 2 strength, plus 2 dexterity, plus 2 willpower, and plus 4 attack, and you can obtain this by solving the pillar puzzle in the Black Marsh Undying during Tears in the Veil. Afterwards, when you're back in the real world, you can loot the runic pedestal to get this. This is a nice belt for warriors and rogues, but since you only care about the dex, I recommend equipping it on someone who wants more of these bonuses, like a melee rogue or a warrior. Doge's Dodger grants +4 strength, +4 dexterity, and missile avoidance. You can loot this from Utha during the final main quest if you don't side with the Architect. This will only be a tiny upgrade you can only use in the very final mission, so You could also equip the Cinch of Skillful Maneuvering, a belt that you obtain by completing an achievement in the Witch Hunt DLC and which you'll have in your inventory from the beginning of the game afterwards. It grants +2 to all attributes, but it also has some great defensive stats that a tanky warrior would appreciate a lot more, so I don't recommend using it on rogues usually. For amulets, there are 4 good ones. Illumination grants +3 to all attributes and +10 mental resistance. You can obtain it by completing the Wending Wood Stone puzzle. Always great to have bonuses to all attributes, but of course, most characters like that. Pearl of the Anointed grants +2 to all attributes and increases monetary gain. You should have this in your inventory from the beginning of the game since it's a promo DLC item. Again, useful for many different characters. Seeker's Chain grants +2 to all attributes, +1 combat health regen, and +3 defense. You can buy it from Glassrick the Weaponsmith and Amaranthine for 10 gold and a half. Very cheap for how useful it is on most characters. Scout's Medal grants +2 dexterity, +10 constitution, +2 armor, and +50 stamina. You can buy it from Uriah in the Throne Room of Vigil's Keep for a bit over 84 gold. A great amulet, though I'd prefer to give it to a warrior or arcane warrior due to the huge constitution bonus. For rings, there is a distinct lack of good ones for rogues in Awakening, so you'll have to make do with what little is here. Nathaniel's unique starting ring, Worn Golden Ring, doesn't do very much for him since it grants just cunning. Better than nothing though, so you can keep it if you don't have an upgrade. Cordon's Proposal grants +2 to all attributes and is a quest reward for the side quest The Trail of Love in the Black Marsh. Pretty much all characters will like this ring, so you'll have to choose who gets the most out of it, and that will likely be a melee character. Ring of Subtlety grants +3 dexterity and +3 cunning, and it's a reward for the side quest The Long Buried Past and Amaranthine. This is the best ring from Awakening for Nathaniel. I'd replace his starting Dusk ring with this. But unfortunately, these are the only good rings in Awakening. Anything with bonuses to dexterity or all attributes from Origins would be nice, like the Ring of the Warrior with +2 strength and dex, the Harvest Festival ring with +2 strength, +2 dex, and +4 attack, or the Key to the City with +2 to all attributes. Finally, let's talk about runes and consumables. In Awakening in particular, I consider runes to be optional. They can provide very useful and sometimes incredibly powerful bonuses to your characters, like the crit chance and crit damage runes I mentioned in my Sigrun build, but you have to craft them, unless you use novice runes or whatever you find as loot. For Nathaniel, the only runes he can use as an archer are armor runes, because bows don't have rune slots. Armor runes are nice, but definitely not necessary for this build. The simple armor runes I recommend are Reservoir runes, which grant extra willpower for the bonus stamina. If you want to craft hybrid runes, then Endurance runes are the best option because they grant a -5% fatigue bonus, making Nathaniel's talents cheaper to activate. He will already be wearing light armor, so his fatigue will be low, but you can also offset some fatigue penalties from sustained talents with this. You will already be fully ignoring the fatigue of your light armor if you have just one of these runes equipped. If you have 3, that's a total 15% bonus, which not only offsets your armor fatigue, but also the fatigue penalty of both aim and suppressing fire. You can buy the Tracing, aka recipe for this rune from Uriah in the Throne Room of Vigil's Keep for almost 9 gold after upgrading his stock once. You just need to save the merchants during the first mission for this. The rune is fairly easy to craft, only requiring rank 2 of the rune crafting skill. The ingredients are 1 blank runestone, 2 etching agents, a Journeyman Stout rune, and a Journeyman Hail rune, which are also very easy and cheap to craft. I was initially planning on mentioning using special arrows for extra damage, but Nathaniel will deal so much damage with his regular attacks, and even more with his damaging abilities, that there's no point in wasting money on fire arrows, because in comparison to his regular damage, they add such a tiny amount that it's nothing. You could also use grenades for some AoE damage, but Nathaniel already has great AoE options with Scattershot and Burst Shot, as well as potentially Rain of Arrows in some situations, so he doesn't need to augment his build with grenades personally, though he could absolutely craft them for other party members who would get more out of this. Just as a note, I mentioned Dispel Grenades in my Sigrun build guide, but since then I have tested them, and as far as I can tell they are unfortunately bugged and don't have any effect. So while in theory being able to dispel any magical effects with a non-mage and non-Templar would have been amazing, unfortunately Dispel Grenades don't work, so I don't recommend them anymore. Finally, let's talk about tactics and party composition. In terms of party composition, I always recommend having one proper tank in the party, at least one ranged character, whether archer or mage. Nathaniel is obviously that one ranged character, but I do also recommend having a mage in your party regardless, because they make combat a lot more comfortable. By tank, I mean a warrior who can use Threaten and Taunt, and in Awakening, Grievous Insult, for the purpose of keeping enemies attacking them instead of their squisher party members. I recommend 1 or 2 ranged characters because you can start dealing damage to enemies that are far away earlier. But also, if you have 3 or 4 melee characters in the party, you'll find that they'll get stuck in doorways and other cramped areas when fighting, and that is both awkward in terms of positioning and causes you to take more damage and take longer to kill those enemies, since you have to get everyone in a good position or wait for them to sort it out themselves. If you don't mind the awkward movement and positioning, of course you could use 3 or even 4 melee characters, but it's going to be a bit weird. I always recommend having a mage in your party unless you're doing a no mage playthrough, because they can heal your party, buff them with spells like haste or weapon enchantments, and of course disable enemies or deal tons of damage to them with offensive spells. You already have Nathaniel for ranged damage, so I would recommend a more support-focused mage, or a short-range or melee mage, like one using the Arcane Warrior, Battle Mage, and or Keeper specializations. That's really all the advice I have for party compositions, because I think that first and foremost, it's important to choose the party that you feel comfortable playing, and which includes the companions you like. So my suggestions are just that, suggestions based on my experience and my playstyle preferences. For Nathaniel's tactics, archers don't have super complicated abilities, and they deal a lot of damage with their basic attacks anyway, so even if you don't have the most comprehensive tactics set up for Nathaniel, he'll be just fine. First, have the accuracy sustained active at all times. The best way to ensure this is to set it up in Nathaniel's tactics as self, any, activate accuracy. Another sustained Nathaniel should have active at all times is suppressing fire. This will be great when fighting groups of enemies that you can apply the attack debuff to all at once by using scatter shot or burst shot. Same thing here, self, any, activate suppressing fire. The final sustained talent you should have active at all times is a summon talent from the ranger specialization. You pick whichever one you like the most and set that into tactics in the same way as the other two. Self, any, activate summon X. The aim sustained is nice, but I don't recommend keeping it active unless you have enough rapid aim bonuses to offset the 1.5 second aim time penalty. If you do have those bonuses, then go ahead and activate this after you activate accuracy. Just set it as self, any, activate aim, but be sure to position this below the accuracy tactic so that accuracy is turned on first, so you can double the crit chance you get from it. If an enemy is attacking Nathaniel in melee, then he should use below the belt on it to try to kill it with a bitey kick, and then you can also have a second tactic to use dirty fighting against that enemy to stun them. Alternatively, if you don't want to use these two abilities, you could just use Ghost whenever Nathaniel is attacked by a melee or ranged attack. For an elite or boss enemy, the best thing to use on them first and foremost is Mark of Death, because it will increase the entire party damage against them by 20%. So in tactics, this would be enemy rank elite or higher, use Mark of Death. Shattering Shot is a great ability to use to remove a tanky enemy's armor. Generally, it's best to use this against tanky elites like Ogres, Darkspawn Alphas or Disciples, Golems, or boss rank enemies. Very easy to set this up in tactics. Enemy has armor type high, use Shattering Shot. On elites and bosses, the best way to deal tons of damage to them is to use abilities that are automatical critical hits, like Critical Shot, Arrow of Slaying, and Burst Shot. Arrow of Slaying and Burst Shot in particular will do more damage than a regular crit, so I recommend putting those higher on the list of tactics, and leaving Critical Shot to have lower priority by adding it towards the bottom of the tactics. Abilities like Scatter Shot, Burst Shot, and Rain of Arrows are best used when multiple enemies are clustered together. You can set this up into tactics by choosing Enemy, Clustered, with at least 2 allies, use Scatter Shot. Or Clustered with at least 3 allies if you think Nathaniel uses these too often with 2. In my opinion, it is better to choose when to use these area of effect abilities yourself, but if you don't want to control him manually at all, he should do quite well with them if set up like this. Since you already have Burst Shot set up to be used against an elite or boss, then only set this kind of tactic for Scatter Shot, and maybe Rain of Arrows if you have the space, though I personally wouldn't use Rain of Arrows since Scatter Shot just seems better. To make sure that Nathaniel can use his strong damaging abilities fairly often in combat, I recommend also telling him to drink a stamina draft whenever he gets under 20% stamina. Self, stamina under 20%, use item, stamina draft. Lesser stamina drafts will be just fine for this, though you can also just tell him to use the lowest quality ones you have in your inventory, just in case you end up running out of the lesser ones. Nathaniel's HP should be alright if you have a tank in the party, and even better if you have a mage who will cast heal and group heal when allies' HP gets low, but if you feel a bit unsure about Nathaniel's survivability, you can have him use a health poultice when his health gets below 40%. Remember that you can also use his defensive talents Ghost and Strength of Stone to protect him. Strength of Stone makes him immune to damage for 15 seconds, so you could either activate this manually when you think Nathaniel is in danger, or set it up in his tactics to use when he gets to under 50 or 60% HP. Ghost I would set up in the tactics to activate if Nathaniel is being attacked by a melee or ranged attack, as I already said, since it will give him a 100% dodge chance. That's about it. Archers are fairly easy to play and can deal tons of damage, and building them is so much easier in Awakening than in Origins because you can ignore the aim sustained due to how amazing accuracy is. That way you have a lot more freedom choosing their gear, and your archer will be strong from the very beginning. In conclusion, Nathaniel can be a great ranged damager that also provides some strong support to his team with his Summon Beast and enemy debuffs. I love the idea of having a How as a companion, even better because he becomes a Grey Warden. Arl How in Origins was an awful dude, but Nathaniel is nice, and I love that he gets to essentially redeem his family through his actions. I like to use both Nathaniel and Sigrun in the party because they're my favorites, and it's insane how much damage the two of them can do. Sigrun as a backstab-focused melee damager, and Nathaniel as a ranged damager. So yes, as an answer to one of my subscribers, you can absolutely use two rogues in your party without any issues. I would recommend having a mage and a warrior in the party to round it out though. Anyway, I hope you found this build guide for Nathaniel in Dragon Age Origins Awakening useful. If you enjoyed this, stick around for future guides and other videos I plan to make about Awakening, Dragon Age in general, and other games I care about. Right now, I'm working on the Awakening companions mostly, but I am of course going to make a lot more stuff in time. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or maybe become a channel member. Everything helps. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.